A low-scoring, bit of a bummer of a week has, well, come and gone. But have no fear, because week 11 is here. We get to wipe away that old low-scoring week and bring in a new, high-scoring, and exciting week 11. At least it better be. This is the DFS Early Look. That's Jake Tribbey. I'm Thomas Tipple. Get ready to be locked in for the earliest look at DFS that you could possibly get in the space. Sit tight.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Jake, looking up and down the DFS early look sheet here that I have in front of me, I am noticing one main factor. This is a don't get too cute week this early on. It is alphas only. And speaking of alphas only, let's talk about the quarterback you have on deck here this week for week 11.
Yeah, so wrote up Brock Purdy this week, only the QB5 on DraftKings at 6,600, and I'm not sure why, but he's just perpetually underpriced on DraftKings week after week, especially now that his weapons are finally healthy. Purdy averaged an absurd 0.66 fantasy points per dropback in the 14 games he played last year with Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and Christian McCaffrey. This year, that mark would rank second best among main slate eligible quarterbacks behind only Lamar Jackson. Now, efficiency aside, it's arguably worth more to Purdy's fantasy prospects that he's playing in the highest total game of week 11 against Seattle. Two of Purdy's best three regular season games came in contests with a total over 46, and Seattle ranks as the seventh softest schedule adjusted matchup for opposing quarterbacks through the air. This is the only spot on the main slate with a total over 48 that doesn't project to be a complete blowout. The Niners are favored by 6.5 here, and that should make Purdy one of the most popular quarterback options of the week, just like what we saw in week 10.
And he is moving on the ground. It is not him just sitting back in the pocket, being boring. He has been an exciting player on the ground as well. The drift back dime to George Kittle had me on my feet, losing my mind. A true dime, playing out of his mind, worth the look. As we move on to the theme of alphas, we get one back, and we got one back this week, and the role was seemingly perfect. Let's talk about, I'm so happy to bring it, it's Christian McCaffrey. Like, we're here now.
Yep, Christian McCaffrey is back, only 8,300 on DraftKings this week, and he was back to his usual workload in week 10. He ranked top 3 among running backs in snap share, route share, and targets. Now, it only translated to 16.7 DraftKings fantasy points, and he didn't look like a world beater on film, but we know these big games will come for McCaffrey if this is the workload we can expect going forward. Last year, McCaffrey posted an 80% snap share and easily led all running backs in both fantasy points per game and expected fantasy points per game. We know he will be out there for nearly every snap in the best scoring environment of the slate in week 11, and he's $1,300 cheaper on DraftKings than he was in week 17 of 2023. You combine that with a top 4 schedule adjusted rushing matchup against Seattle, and it's easy to see a bull case for Christian McCaffrey this week.
It's one of those things where maybe you look at that snap share and you're like, well, what about Jordan Mason got one touch. Isaac Orendo, one touch. When McCaffrey's not in the game for those very few sets of snaps, they go elsewhere. He is 100% back in terms of usage, like you poetically laid out. Let's talk about a little bit of surprise added to this list of pure alphas that we are talking about today. A future alpha, perhaps. Let's talk about Audric Estime.
Yeah, I can't speak to whether or not he'll be a future alpha, but the workload has certainly been solid. We saw a big-time sea change in this Denver backfield last week, and I should start by saying it's been a while since we've seen some serious running back value on the board. Estime only 4,500 on DraftKings. That's RB44 price tag. And on Sunday, he earned 14 of 17 backfield carries, 65% of backfield expected fantasy points, and 2 of 3 backfield red zone opportunities. Now, he scored just 5.3 fantasy points, but it was against the single toughest schedule adjusted matchup for running backs in the NFL, the Kansas City Chiefs. This week, Estime gets a notably easier matchup against Atlanta as a 1.5 point favorite. Now, there's still plenty of risk. Bo Nix could vulture rushing touchdowns. Estime would almost certainly be scripted out if Denver fell behind here. But the opportunity to play a $4,500 running back on DraftKings with a clear path to 15 carries opens up so much for your lineup that you have to at least consider Audric Estime in week 11.
We love dumpster diving running backs when we can. And like you said, it has been a while since we have seen legitimate value on the board. If we were to shift over to wide receivers, alpha is definitely a word that really hits home with George Pickens, who seems to have an option in World Wrestling Entertainment post NFL career with some of his insane highlights. But let's talk about his work on the football field. George Pickens this week, wide receiver 8. This is an absolutely insane matchup.
Yeah, it is. So I'll start by saying the addition of Russell Wilson has been worth about a 20% boost to George Pickens' catchable air yards and about a 16% boost to his expected fantasy points per game. Now, these boosts may not seem like much, but it's no coincidence that both of Pickens' 20-plus point fantasy outings this season have come with Russell Wilson under center. Now, generally speaking, Pickens is just a bit too expensive relative to his usage, especially on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's a bit cheaper, priced as the wide receiver 13, but I think that's easy to overlook in a truly perfect matchup. The Ravens are the single softest schedule adjusted matchup for opposing wide receivers, allowing more than twice as much schedule adjusted production to the position as the next worst team, which are the Detroit Lions. Alongside the San Francisco versus Seattle game, this Steelers game, according to Las Vegas, is one of the only high total games with the potential to shoot out. That's precisely what Pickens needs to succeed. His volume is held back by a bottom 5 neutral situation pass rate, but the Steelers will have every incentive to air it out this week against an extremely vulnerable Baltimore pass defense as a 3-point underdog.
Yeah, he's gonna. This is a week to go. Absolutely insane. Let's talk about a wide receiver with what seems to be an equal opportunity to go absolutely insane. He has taken over the alpha role, continuing the theme of the day. Let's talk about new Cleveland Browns alpha, Cedric Tillman, coming back off a bye week where people might be sleeping a little bit.
Yeah, FanDuel certainly wasn't sleeping. They've priced Cedric Tillman up to the wide receiver 22. DraftKings, though, still asleep here. Wide receiver 35 at just 5,300. And I really can't believe they haven't made more of an effort to price up Tillman. Since Deshaun Watson tore his Achilles, Tillman ranks 6th in catchable targets per game, 4th in expected fantasy points per game, and 2nd behind only Jamar Chase in DraftKings fantasy points per game. It doesn't take much to notice that his wide receiver 35 DraftKings price tag is an egregious error. And now Tillman draws a sane secondary that just traded away Marshawn Lattimore, lost starting cornerback Paulson Adebo to IR, and didn't have round 2 rookie Kool-Aid McKinstry in week 10 due to injury. Tillman, who is already one of the most mispriced players of week 11, could be looking at one of his best matchups of the season against a beat-up New Orleans secondary this week.
We love the opportunity here for Cedric Tillman across the board. The entire brand seems to be hopping right on board here. Let's talk tight end. And it looked bleak. It looked like we were ready to let Travis Kelce ride off into the sunset. But over the last couple of weeks, that role is back and he looks good. Just please stop fumbling, Travis. We need every single one of those points, please. But let's talk.
Yeah, the deeper we get into the season, the more we see value dry up a bit, which means we need to treat these elite tight ends a bit more like wide receivers and give them a little bit more credence to maybe playing them in the flex. Kelce, only 6,300 on DraftKings this week, despite ranking 3rd among wide receivers in week 10 expected fantasy points and ranking behind only CeeDee Lamb in catchable targets per game since week 7. Slow start be damned. The workload for Kelce is just incredible. He's priced as the wide receiver 18 on DraftKings, but he's earned 18.6 expected fantasy points per game over the last month. That's the fourth best workload among main slate eligible wide receivers over that time span. And the matchup with Buffalo can really only help here. Kelce's 6.5 average depth of target is the lowest among Kansas City's healthy pass catchers. Buffalo has allowed the fourth most receptions and the sixth highest catch rate on throws under 15 yards. If the Bills continue to funnel volume underneath, double-digit targets is a near lock for Kelce, as his recent usage has ranked among the best wide receivers in the NFL.
We have no choice. This is what we have to do. If you want more from DFS Early Look, Jake Tribbey's article will be out. It will be posted in the link below the second the article is released. If you want more DFS content, well, you can hit like, subscribe, catch all of the live streams from DFS Cage Match, Cashing Points, Outside the Box, Drafter Party, and more. We really do pump out a ton of DFS content. But for Jake Tribbey, I'm Thomas Tipple. This is the earliest look you can get with the DFS Early Look. We will see you guys in week 12.